What is up, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the 3&D here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Make sure you hit subscribe below and follow our socials at the 3&D ETB and at ETB Network. On tonight's episode, we'll be talking about the James Harden market and all of the updates that are coming with that. Not too many things going on, but some trade news going down. KenPom dropped his new rankings for ahead of the college basketball season. That'll be starting in just a few weeks. So we'll be going over those top 25 and the most interesting ones to make the top 25 to get snubbed and all of that. And then the preseason roster battles are well into effect with the preseason starting to come down to the end. Certain teams have only a few roster spots left, so we'll be going over those teams, the guys who are trying to make the rosters, and who most likely is going to be filling out the rosters. So I hope everybody's doing well. Once again, we finished off our season previews. The NBA season is a week and a half away, so we're going to be getting a lot of content soon. And next season we'll be previewing the opening night's lineups and all of the games to look out for. But this week we're just kind of winding down the preseason a little bit and taking a look at the trade market a little bit more. So jumping right into things, we got the James Harden trade market. The Harden market has not been too huge or anything over the past couple of weeks. There hasn't been too much information coming out about, if he's going somewhere, all that kind of stuff. But an offer is on the table from the Clippers, reportedly. That did come out this week. An offer is on the table for the Clippers. Multiple expiring contracts would be in the trade. A first-round pick and pick swaps would also be in the trade. So that's apparently on the table for the 76ers. Daryl Morey is contemplating it. According to sources, he's the one that's kind of holding the entire thing up. The Clippers are completely willing to do this trade to try to send James to acquire James Harden and bring in a couple of and send out a couple of expiring contracts by doing so. They have a few interesting expiring contracts too. Robert Covington, Mason Plumlee, Marcus Morris Sr., and Nicholas Batum are all expiring contracts after this year. So those four guys, it'll probably be some type of combination of those four guys would end up getting traded to the 76ers in exchange for James Harden, which, if you look at it and the Sixers don't think that Harden's going to play, and if they want to go into the season kind of without the headache of the entire situation that's going on, I think it would be smart to accept this trade from the Clippers. Say you get like Plumlee and Marcus Morris or something back. You're acquiring two good veterans to add to your team to try to help compete this year. You're adding a first-round pick and you're adding some pick swaps, and you're sending out James Harden, who you're trying to get rid of anyway. He's made it quite evident and quite clear that he does not want to play for the 76ers this season, even though he did report to camp. So it'll be interesting to see if in the next week or so, if he isn't able to agree on a trade, if he ends up deciding to debut with the Sixers or if he's just going to sit the bench. That's definitely going to be something that's very interesting to see, but Harden's still evident on making a trade work. Daryl Morey wants a trade to work as well, but he wants to get kind of whatever he can out of it. And I'm not entirely surprised by this entire thing. So I think that the 76ers are smart to try to expand out who they can get in exchange for James Harden, and so on and so forth. So especially with the amount of powerhouses that are in the Eastern Conference this year, with everybody in the Atlantic Division too, that have become kind of contenders and teams to watch out for. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening, and the Western Conference is going to become that much more stacked if James Harden is able to be sent out to the Clippers. So that's the new news on the James Harden market. Over the next week or two, we'll be taking more and more of an in-depth look. We'll see if he ends up getting traded before training camp. Before the actual season begins. The preseason is going to be wrapping up within the next week. We're about a week and a half away from the NBA season tipping off, so it's going to get a lot more interesting very, very soon. So jumping over from the NBA, we'll go into a little bit of college basketball. So KenPom dropped his preseason rankings for his top 25. He actually dropped his entire rank is for all 350 some odd Division I teams, as he always does. But this past weekend, he just came out with his updated rankings, and they're very interesting. And they're a lot different than what most analysts kind of predict that the top 25 is going to look like. We haven't seen the preseason AP top 25 just yet. We're still like 3 weeks away from college basketball beginning anyway, so we're not going to see that for like another week or two, probably, the actual AP top 25. But KenPom dropped his top 25 rankings. And starting down from the bottom, at number 25, we got Kansas State. So Kansas State had an amazing year last year with Jerome Tang taking over as the head coach. Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel, who were both their star players last year, were on their way out. Noel is now on the Toronto Raptors, and Keontae Johnson is now going to be on the Oklahoma City Thunder as he got drafted in the second round. So K-State ends up losing their two best players, but they're still returning a lot of guys, and Jerome Tang really showed a lot in his first year as a college basketball head coach, and they immediately jumped back into the top 25. Texas A&M is at 24, so Buzz Williams and Texas A&M, they haven't been very competitive since Buzz Williams took over, but they're jumping back into the top 25. Villanova is at 23, so Villanova had a rough couple of years, the last couple of years since the last year, I should say, since Kyle Wright decided to retire. Jay Wright, I should say, not Kyle Wright. Since Jay Wright decided to retire, Kyle Neptune took over, who was Fordham's head coach for a year, and then saw that that Wright decided to retire, so he jumped over to Villanova. Villanova kind of had like a restart of a year last year. They had Cam Whitmore, who was their star freshman, ended up being the 20th overall pick, I think, in this year's draft to the Houston Rockets. But besides that, they didn't have too many guys that were big pieces. But this year, they've got an interesting little bunch. Ended up bringing in some recruits to kind of make things a little bit more interesting. And KenPom thinks that they're going to be an immediate top 25 team, which I'm not too ready to jump the gun on that. There's a lot of good teams in the Big East. I'll let you know right now, St. John's not in the top 25, which I think is kind of crazy. With the amount of guys that they were able to land last year, and going into this season, I think that they're going to be a perennial top 25 team. But Justin Moore is going to return for Villanova. They brought in Hakeem Hart, who's a transfer from Maryland. They also brought in TJ Bamba, who was one of the top recruits. Who was one of the top transfers in the nation during this offseason. So they brought in a couple of interesting transfers. They're going to be a good team. I just think 23 is a little bit interesting for them. A little bit of an interesting placement right off the bat. But KenPom is so analytical, and there's never you can look at every single one of his rankings, and there's going to be a lot of ones that make your head scratch, and that you don't completely understand. But there's a method to the madness. Then at 22, we got Maryland. So Maryland going to jump up a little bit. They've been kind of in and out of the top 25 the last couple of years. At number 21 is USC. So USC, I think, should be expecting to have a big year this year. They're bringing in two huge recruits, with the number one overall recruit coming in, number one overall freshman in the nation, at Isaiah Collier, who is a good shot at being the number one overall pick in the 2024 draft. And they're bringing in Bronny James, too, who's the number 20 recruit in the ESPN Top 100. Obviously, Bronny had those issues during the offseason. We'll see if that lingers into the season, those hard issues, nothing to play around with. But USC is going to be definitely an interesting team. And then Wisconsin will be at 20. Wisconsin's always in the mix. Greg Gard's always got a good program going on there. Illinois is at number 19. Brad Underwood doing a great job there. They're also another team that's always going to be in the mix. Terrence Shannon Jr. also will be returning to Illinois for his 5th year, so he'll make things a lot more interesting. He's going to be using up his extra year of eligibility, and will probably become the star player of Illinois. And then at number 18 is Kentucky. Kentucky, very, very interesting that Kentucky is ranked kind of this low. They have 4 top 20 freshmen coming in. They have the number 3 overall recruit, Justin Edwards, number 4, DJ Wagner, number 6, Aaron Bradshaw, number 15, Robert Dillingham. So they've got a lot of guys coming in this upcoming year, and they did lose a lot of guys, though. That's why they kind of fell a little bit. I mean, they weren't ranked that high last year as it was anyway. Throughout the season, they ended up falling short, but Oscar Sheboy left, and they also lost Jacob Toppin and a variety of other guys, but they're replacing pretty much all of those guys with good freshmen that are all coming in. I thought it was interesting having Kentucky this low to start off the bat. I don't think they'll be this low on the AP top 25. I think that they're going to be a lot higher up. Ugonu and Yensu, they had coming back. Antonio Reeves, they got coming back. And then they have all those incoming freshmen. So I think that they're going to be pretty high up in the AP top 25. They may even be in the 10 to 15 range. So I don't think they're going to be as low as 18 as KenPom has them. But he's not huge on them. And I mean, a lot of times we see in KenPom's rankings, though, he's much bigger on teams with guys that are veterans and veteran experience. And speaking of veteran experience, number 17 is North Carolina. And they're bringing in 2 big-time veterans in Armando Bacot and RJ Davis, who are both returning. Caleb Love decided to transfer to Arizona, who's a little bit higher up on this list. But they did a bunch of interesting stuff. And Armando Bacot's been their star player over the last couple of years. He's going to be a 5th-year senior this year. He's using up that final year of eligibility. And then RJ Davis, who's one of their star players as well, will be returning. So them being in the top 25 makes sense. They had a down year last year, but it's Bacot's final year, so they're going to be trying to make the most out of it. And then at number 16, we have Texas. At number 15, we have Auburn. Both of those teams. Auburn was dominant over the last a few years ago, and the last couple of years they've been a little bit down. They haven't been able to bring in the top recruits, and have had some bad play from some of their veterans, but they're projected to be much higher up this year, Auburn. And they're going to definitely make some things interesting in the SEC. I find it interesting that they're already ahead of Kentucky in those rankings, but in the top 25. I mean, at 15, I don't think Auburn's going to be that high on the AP top 25, but they do have some interesting names. They got Katie Johnson coming back, who is one of their big backcourt pieces. Jalen Williams coming back. Jalen Harper as well. And Janai Broom as well, who's going to be a senior now this year. They had a good year last year, had a decent year last year, I should say, and they're bringing practically everybody back, so that's why they expect kind of some good things out of them. Then number 14 is Arkansas, and Arkansas lost. They had 3 top freshmen last year in Nick Smith Jr., Anthony Black, and Jordan Walsh, who were all drafted in this year's draft. They ended up losing all of them. So it'll make things interesting to see who becomes the star player, who steps up and is the big name. I don't think they have any. I think they may have 1 top 25 recruit that's coming in, but they do have Trevon Brazile, who was one of their their starting big man, and he ended up going down because he got hurt and missed the majority of the season because of that. But he should be returning for them, and he probably becomes a star player. Devontae Davis also is coming back, who is one of their best scorers in the backcourt. So I do like Arkansas a little bit. Khalif Battle's also coming back. I think they got 1 or 2 incoming freshmen that are pretty solid as well. So So definitely interested to see them. And then number 13, we got Michigan State. And number 12, we got Creighton. So Creighton's going to be one of the more interesting teams in the Big East this year. They have 3 of their star players returning. Baylor Shireman is going to be using his 5th year of eligibility. Trey Alexander will be a true senior. And Ryan Kalkbrenner will be a junior this year. So all 3 of them are coming back. Kalkbrenner was beginning to develop as one of the more dangerous low post threats in college basketball last season. Had some injury issues as well. Baylor Shireman's a knockdown 3-point shooter, good defender. He was a transfer from North Dakota State, and he ended up becoming a big piece for Creighton. So they're going to be interesting. And then another Big East team, we got number 11, Marquette. Marquette brings back 2 of their star players, Tyler Kolek, who won Big East Player of the Year last year, and Cam Jones, who's one of their star forwards. So they end up bringing possibly their 2 best players back. And so that does make sense at number 11. Number 10 is Alabama. Alabama's been able to bring in a bunch of recruits as of late and has been doing a good job with that. Number 9, we got is Duke. And Duke makes sense. Duke should definitely be back to Duke terms, as they haven't really been the last couple of years. Last year, was the first year of the post-Coach K era. And John Shire did a very solid job, I think, of the first year without Coach K. But Duke's bringing in a few top 100 recruits, including the number 10 recruit, Jared McCain, who's a guard. And they're also bringing back a few guys who have good shots of being first-round picks in this upcoming draft. Tyrese Proctor, who was a freshman last year, is returning. Kyle Filipowski, who was also a freshman last year, returns. And Jeremy Roach, who's a senior, has been on the team for a while. He's going to be returning. Then number 8, we got Tennessee. Rick Barnes' squad is always competitive. Number 7, we got Baylor, who's bringing in a couple more recruits this year, as they always do. And then number 6, we got Arizona. Arizona was a dynamic team last year, probably the best team in the Pac-12. And they completely underperformed, ended up losing in the first round as a 2 seed in the tournament. But they lost to Julius Tubelis, who was their leading scorer, but they're bringing in Caleb Love, who is transferring from North Carolina into his senior year now and probably steps in as their star player. So there's going to be a lot of promise with them. Gonzaga will be at number 5. Gonzaga lost a lot of guys, but they're still remaining high. I mean, it doesn't really matter who's on their roster. Mark Few always has that team in the top 10. Drew Timmy's gone. Julian Strother's gone, but they're going to be bringing in a bunch of pieces. They brought in Efton Reed a couple of years ago. He'll probably have a bit of an increased role this upcoming year, so that'll definitely make things interesting. And then more in the top 5, we got number 4, we got UConn, Donovan Clingan. I mean, obviously the reigning NCAA champions, Donovan Clingan, who is a potential first-round pick this upcoming year, and Caravan are both returning. They lost a few guys, but they're also bringing in a few freshmen. They end up landing a couple of recruits to make things interesting. And then at number 3, we got Houston. Houston's been a powerhouse over the last several years now. Jamal Shedd returns, Arsenault returns, and they bring in an LJ Cryer, who's transferred from Baylor, who maybe step in and become their leading scorer right off the bat. He's a very talented scorer. Then at number 2, they got Kansas. So Kansas could very well be the number 1 team in the preseason rankings in the AP Top 25. I would not be surprised. They're probably the favorites to be that. They added Hunter Dickinson this offseason, which was probably the biggest recruit signing, with biggest transfer signing this offseason. He transferred over from Michigan. And Nick Timberlake, too, who was one of the more underrated transfers. They ended up landing him, too. KJ Adams, Kevin McCullough, and DeJuan Harris all are returning, and that's going to be their starting 5 right there, those 5 guys. And that very well could be the best starting 5 in the nation right off the bat. So Kansas is at number 2 on KenPom. They'll probably be number 1 in the AP Top 25. And the number 1 in the AP Top 25 is Purdue. And Purdue brings back practically everybody that they had last year, including the National Player of the Year, Zach Edey. So that's one of the main reasons why they're so high. I'm not too sure that I would have them a preseason number 1. I don't think that they're that good, and I'm not too convinced on them this season, but KenPom definitely likes them, and they'll definitely make things interesting. I mean, they're going to be a dynamic team. I was surprised with how competitive they stayed last year after losing Jaden Ivey and losing Sasha Stefanovic and a bunch of guys that they had. I was a little bit surprised that they were able to stay as competitive as they were, and it was mainly due to Zach Edey kind of breaking out and becoming that star player. So Edey now will be entering his senior season, and will definitely be one of the guys to watch out for in the entire nation. So that's KenPom's top 25. You can go over to kenpom.com and check out their entire rankings from 1 through 350, whatever. All the Division One teams, all of his preseason rankings, and so on. So you can go check that out. But that's his top 25. Bunch that I agree with, a few that I disagree with. I'm not sure Texas A&M is going to be the top 25. I know St. John's was ranked 60, which I thought was kind of crazy. They're very likely. I wouldn't say most likely, but they're very likely to be a preseason top 25 in the AP poll. Of most analysts who have made their preseason top 25 already have them in the top 25. Like in the 20s at some point. I know John Rothstein is counting down his top 45, and he had St. John's at 23, I think, as he's counting down before the season. So I would be surprised if, anyone had them as low as 60. I guess according to the analytics, he's not completely in love with them yet, but I think they're going to have a very, very good year and compete well in the Big East. So jumping back over from college basketball, we'll go back into the NBA for our last segment, some of the preseason roster battles. So not every team has their entire roster set for the upcoming season. There's a few teams that are right now figuring things out. They've got a couple open roster spots, or they have too many players under contract that they're going to have to cut. So this is a little guide for you guys to keep an eye out over the next week to see who ends up making some rosters and who ends up getting cut. So the first team is the Cleveland Cavaliers. So they got one roster spot open. And right now it's coming down to Zaire Smith, Justin Powell, Pete Nance, and Sharif Cooper. So Justin Powell and Pete Nance are both rookies. Both of them signed Exhibit 10 contracts. They're probably both going to play in the G League this year for the Cavaliers. So I don't think that they really have a shot. It's mainly between Zaire Smith and Sharif Cooper, who have both been in the league for a few years. Zaire Smith was a former first-round pick. He's played in the G League the last couple of years, hasn't played in the NBA since the 2021 season, I don't think. And he's also had some health scares too. There was something that came out about him being hospitalized for a period of time, losing a lot of weight, all that kind of stuff. And now he's trying to fight back for his NBA career. And I think that he's the favorite. I think that he's going to land one of the roster spots. They have one wide open with those 4 non-guaranteed contracts. The favorite right now, I think, is Zaire Smith, but the only other one that I think they would consider is Sharif Cooper, who also signed an Exhibit 10 contract. So if he doesn't make the roster, he'll go play in the G League for the Cavaliers. Then the other one is the Detroit Pistons. They have 2 roster spots open. They've got one roster spot and one 2-way contract open. And right now, the guys on their roster who are non-guaranteed contracts, Buddy Boeheim, Xavier Simpson, who is a small guard from Michigan, Jonte Porter, Tosin Ebumwan, who is a rookie from Princeton. Don't really think he has very much of a chance. And Stanley Amude, who's also a rookie. I think the two of them are pretty much G League guys. Jonte Porter is Michael Porter Jr.'s brother. He's got some NBA experience. Xavier Simpson was a rookie last year, has a little NBA experience. And Buddy Boeheim actually was on the Pistons' actual roster to end off the season last year. He started on a 2-way and was promoted to their actual roster. So the favorite to make their roster, probably make the 15th spot on their bench, is Buddy Boeheim. And then they have an open 2-way contract, and that's probably going to go down to Xavier Simpson or Jonte Porter. Probably Xavier Simpson ends up getting it. He played a little bit last year and ended up doing a great job with garbage minutes towards the end of the season when a lot of guys were hurt and they were, giving guys 10-day contracts. He actually played pretty well. So those are the 2 guys that I think are going to end up making it. Realistically, it seems like the 2 rookies and Jonte Porter are probably going to play in the G League this upcoming year. Then we got the Charlotte Hornets. Charlotte Hornets just cut Kai Jones. Everybody who's big NBA fans kind of been following that weird situation. He's kind of gone crazy, to say the least. Posting things on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. He got sent away from the team because of his behavior, and they ultimately cut him a week ago. And he hasn't really done much throughout his NBA career. He was a late first round pick, I believe, or an early second round pick, and was just a backup big man. But since they cut him, they got one roster spot open, and that's going to come down between Edmund Sumner, who was backup point guard for Brooklyn Nets last year, RJ Hunter, who hasn't played in the NBA in several years, but has been in the G League over the past few years, and Nathan Mensah, who's a rookie. I think it's pretty evidently going to go to Edmund Sumner. He has the most NBA experience. He's been in the league over the last several years. He played some decent minutes towards the end of the season for the Brooklyn Nets last year. I think that he's going to end up getting one of their last roster spot. RJ Hunter and Nathan Mensah probably go play in the G League this year. And then the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat have 2 open roster spots, and they're trying out a bunch of guys. It's kind of like an open tryout type of thing. They've got a bunch of guys already under contract, but a few guys who are fighting it out for those 2 open roster spots is Justin Champagnie, who has plenty of NBA experience. He was on a 2-way contract with the Toronto Raptors. Cheick Diallo, who's a name that NBA fans probably haven't heard in a few years, went to go play overseas, played in the G League a little bit. He's in camp right now with the Miami Heat. And Alondas Williams, who was a rookie last year, was on a 2-way contract with the Brooklyn Nets for a period of time. And then play in the G League. He doesn't really have much of a chance. I think those 2 roster spots are going to end up going to Champagnie and Cheick Diallo. This may be the first time Cheick Diallo makes an NBA roster in probably like 3-4 years coming out of training camp. And then Justin Champagnie, too, has played well in the little time that he's gotten. Has played tremendous when he's played in the G League. Their 3 2-way contracts are all filled. There's always a chance that one of those guys could get promoted from a 2-way contract to the actual roster. The number one guy potentially being RJ Hampton. RJ Hampton was released by the Orlando Magic, was a top draft pick, and the Heat signed him to a 2-way contract. There's definitely a very decent shot that he could get promoted from the 2-way to one of their actual roster spots if they decide not to go with Champagnie and Diallo and Williams, and they can go into the season with 2 2-ways. But if they keep those 3 2-ways, it's probably going to be Champagnie and Diallo. And then the Orlando Magic, they only have 1 2-way contract open, and it's coming down to 4 guys. They have 4 guys who signed Exhibit 10 contracts. Mac McClung being the most notable. Mi Aoni, who has some NBA experience, was a former first-round pick, didn't really do much for the Utah Jazz. Trevelin Queen and Brandon Williams. I think Mac McClung is probably going to get that last 2-way now that they have 3 2-way contracts. I think it's pretty. He's played a lot in the preseason too. He was a very notable signing when the Orlando Magic signed him. They just don't have any room on their 15-man roster, so I feel like with that open 2-way contract, they're going to sign McClung, and they might do it relatively soon. Honestly, I feel like he's going to end up getting one of those 2-ways. And the Washington Wizards have a very interesting situation. So they made so many trades this offseason. They have a practically completely new team than this year, but they have 17 guys that are under contract for only 16 spots. So basically one guy needs to get cut. So they got they have 1 2-way contract and 1 roster spot open. And the guys who are under contract who have guaranteed contracts that are probably candidates to get cut could be Ryan Rollins and Patrick Baldwin Jr., 2 rookies from last year that came over from Golden State. I think they probably make the team. They're young guys. They both were kind of high draft picks as well. That's like the perfect situation for them, the Wizards, to see if they got anything. And then Patrick Baldwin Jr. was also a top recruit too, 5-star recruit out of high school. And then Anthony Gill and Xavier Cooks. So my prediction is that Anthony Gill and Xavier Cooks will probably both get cut. One of them might sign to a 2-way contract because they do have 1 2-way contract open. Probably won't be Anthony Gill because Anthony Gill's played on their actual roster over the last couple of years. He'll probably want to test free agency, see if he can get signed by somebody if an injury happens. or something along those lines. So I feel like he probably won't sign a two-way contract. I think Xavier Cooks probably ends up getting that two-way if that's what it comes down to. And then the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. They have one roster spot open, and it's between three guys: Tyrese Martin, who was a rookie last year for the Atlanta Hawks; Vid Krejci, who had played for the Oklahoma City Thunder the last couple of years; and Deshaun Nix, who played for the Houston Rockets the last couple of years. So they got three guys in camp who have NBA experience over the last several years, and were pretty decent and got some good minutes at times. So it could go to any of those three. My personal guess would be that it goes to Tyrese Martin. It seems like he's been playing the most minutes in the preseason. He's been playing pretty well too. So one actual roster spot's going to go to one of those three. And it probably will be Tyrese Martin. Then the Oklahoma City Thunder are basically in the same situation the Washington Wizards are in. They have 18 guys under contract for 15 spots, basically. They already have their three two-way contracts given out. So unless they cut some of those guys and give them to other guys, they basically have to cut three guys. So there's really four guys in this scenario that are fighting for one roster spot. Practically everyone else has made the team. And you look at the entire roster of the Oklahoma City Thunder, there's a bunch of guys that got very few minutes, but there are a few that you would think that are pretty much a clear to make the team. Victor Oladipo, even though he's going to be hurt to start the season, he'll make the team. Isaiah Joe was a knockdown three-point shooter last year. I think he'll make the team. Usman Jang, who was a first-round pick just a couple of years ago, he'll definitely make the team. And Aaron Wiggins, I think, will make the team as well. And then the rest of their roster is pretty obvious who's going to make the team. So really, for the one roster spot, it comes down to four guys, and they're going to have to cut three of these guys and only keep one of them. So that comes down to Jack White, who was on a two-way contract with the Denver Nuggets last year. He signed to like a 1 year, $1.5 million. Keep in mind, all four of these guys have guaranteed contracts for this upcoming season. So the Thunder are going to have to eat some money no matter what. That was the issue. They traded for too many guys who are under contract, who have guaranteed contracts for this upcoming season. Trey Mann is another one as well, who's actually gotten decent minutes in his first few years in the NBA. He's been an inconsistent shooter. Some people think that he might end up getting cut. Then you have Davis Bertans, who was kind of a throw-in. He's on a terrible contract. He's going to be owed $16 million this year. He signed that terrible contract with the Wizards a few years ago, but he's been getting traded around the league because nobody wants him. He's definitely one of the candidates to get cut. And then Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who actually has gotten a lot of starter minutes as a big man for the Thunder over the last few years. He's another candidate to get cut. In my opinion, I think that Trey Mann is going to end up making the team. And I think that Jack White, Davis Bertans, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl all end up getting cut. They all have guaranteed contracts for this upcoming season, so the Thunder are going to have to eat the money. So I do think that the Bertans is not going to make the team. There's no reason that he should make the team either. They'd be a better team without him. The only reason why he might be the one out of those four to make the team is because he's owed $16 million. So instead of just eating the money, the Thunder might keep him to start the season just to see if they can get anything out of him coming off the bench, even though he'll probably barely play. But my prediction is that they just eat the $16 million. They completely cut him, let him go sign with somebody else, and then they cut Jack White and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. And the Jeremiah Robinson Earl's played the last few years for them. Jack White was an interesting one. They kind of signed him for like no reason almost. He was a very weird signing towards late in free agency this year. They signed him to like a 1 year, $1.5 million deal. It wasn't even a two-way contract. He was on a two-way last year with the Nuggets. Didn't even play that much. He was injured for a while. So that was definitely a very interesting situation when they signed him, but I don't even think that he's going to end up playing as a member of the Thunder. He'll probably be he's almost one of the guarantees to get cut because he doesn't really make too much sense to be the one to get kept. People do think though that Trey Mann could end up getting cut. They got a lot of guards on their roster. Trey Mann has gotten a lot of minutes. as a Thunder, but he's a very inconsistent shooter, and they have a lot more guards now. They made a lot of trades and a lot more brought in a lot of rookies that they think are just better players than him. So there's definitely a decent chance that he could end up getting cut. If he gets cut, somebody's going to pick him up quickly. I could see a team holding on to like 14 guys to start a season to see who ends up getting cut and trying to hop on them. So that'll be an interesting one, but only one of those 4 guys is going to end up making the roster. It could end. It may not be these 4 guys. It could end up being one of the guys that we think is a lock to make the roster ends up getting cut. So, and then they end up keeping 2 of these 4 guys or something like that. So that'll make things interesting. Then the final team is the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers have 1 spot open on their 15-man roster. And right now they have 3 undrafted rookies who have their 2-way contracts. So it looks like their 3 2-way contracts are done. Scottie Pippen Jr., I think, is really the only guy who would make this 15-man roster. I think that it's probably a 50-50 chance either Scottie Pippen Jr. Makes the actual roster after being a 2-way player last year. He either makes the actual roster or the Lakers go into the season with a 14-man roster and try to jump on one of those guys. If Trey Mann or somebody gets cut, maybe sign him or something like that. Or if Davis Bertans gets cut, maybe they sign him to be at the end of their bench or something like that. I could see them, if they're not completely impressed with Scottie Pippen Jr., I could definitely see them doing that too. And Pippen probably playing in the G League or something like that to go into the season. But that's pretty much it for the preseason roster battles. And that's practically the majority of what's been going on this week. Not too much stuff going on. We're wrapping up the preseason. So there's going to be a lot more news coming out this week. Rosters are going to be starting to get set. The NBA season is going to tip off next week. So we'll have a good preseason preview show next week for you guys. But that's going to wrap things up for this week's episode. I want to thank everyone who tuned into the Empty the Bench Podcast Network for another episode. Once again, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel and follow the socials at the 3&D ETB. We'll be putting out content all week in case you missed the entire episode. So you can go back, check out the highlights, all that kind of stuff. So make sure you follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram as well. Hope everyone has a great night, and make sure to like and subscribe to Empty the Bench on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a good night, everybody.